Hello, I'm Marcus Railton, and welcome to Series 3 of the ScotsCare Podcast. ScotsCare is the only charity dedicated to helping disadvantaged Scots across London, breaking the cycle of poverty through services such as financial support, homelessness, mental health therapy, family support, advocacy, sheltered housing, social events and befriending, amongst others. In the new series, I'll be chatting with guests from all backgrounds, all with one thing in common: Scottish roots. Listen to the ScotsCare Podcast to hear their story. In this episode, I'm joined by Len Pennie, a poet whose work many people will already know from social media, where her sharp, funny and deeply honest writing has reached millions. Len first became widely known for her Scots language poems that are witty, accessible, that's the word, and unapologetically modern. But her work also goes much deeper than that. Len writes openly about mental health in general and the challenges she has faced personally. She writes about identity and her experience of domestic abuse. Subjects she handles with courage, clarity and compassion. And we do talk about that within this podcast. Her poetry has helped spark conversations that are often difficult to start, and she's become an important voice for people who feel unheard or unseen. This is a thoughtful, often candid, open conversation about creativity, resilience, and the power of words. Serious when it needs to be, but never without Len's trademark warmth or humanity. I'm really grateful that she joined me, and I'm glad you're here to listen. We kicked off our chat looking back at 2025 for her, professionally and personally, and straight away she was open and candid about both of those things. We spoke about nerves when she is performing in public, and what she does to combat them, and how she appears so wonderfully calm. Len champions the Scots language, and we had a blether about that. We touched on poetry and education, and its significance for young people of the next generation. And finally, Len was kind enough to read one of her wonderful poems. That was towards the end, so stick around for that. So let's get into this. Here's Len Pennie on the ScotsCare Podcast.
Love what ScotsCare does? Help us spread the word. Share this podcast, tell a friend, or give us a shout out on social media. Like and share our posts. The more people that know us, the more Scots we can support.
Hi Len.
Hiya.
Thanks for doing this.
Oh, no worries. I'm really excited. It's I really love being able to talk long form because my videos are so short. I like it when I'm trusted with more than 30 seconds.
Well, if it's not too late to wish you Happy New Year.
Thank you very much, and to yourself.
And how was 2025 for you professionally and personally? Because certainly professionally, you seem to be going from strength to strength.
Professionally, it's been really good. I mean, we launched the second book, Poems and All, and I had recently started a new job on the radio broadcast, and so a lot of new opportunities to learn things, a lot of opportunities for growth. Personally, it's been another year of just trying to work towards healing and trying to get to grips with mental health, things like that. So it's definitely been a year where I've had a lot of opportunities to grow, and I'm going to say that very diplomatically because sometimes, I get told it's either a blessing or a lesson. I've learned a lot this year.
I think I've read a lot about you in the last couple of weeks, and you do seem very pragmatic, as in, you don't look at things very black and white. You do seem to say, because there was something I read about you. You said you were talking about depression and joy, and you said in an interview that you probably may always suffer from times of depression, but you would hold on to the joy while you can, which I think is a really pragmatic way of looking at life.
I think I've had a lot of experience being mentally ill. I mean, my mental illness has been struggling with me for many, many years. So I've gotten to find what works, but it's always very difficult to articulate to people who might not have gone through it. But when you're in that dark place, you can't see out of it. And when you're out of the dark place, you can't fathom how it could possibly have been as bad as you remember it. So it's important for me when I am sad to try and still find little moments of joy. And that's why, Even when I'm quite ill and struggling quite badly with my mental health, I still do the Scots word of the day, and people are they can't really square that. They can't really understand why I would do that. But for me, it's so intrinsically linked to my routine and
Mm.
having a little thing. It doesn't take that long to do. I mean, it does take a little bit of time, but it doesn't take that much effort to actually film and post the word of the day. So having that moment where I just say, no, no matter how I'm feeling, I get that up, I can look back, it's like a diary, but also, it becomes a kind of record of how the day was. And for me, it's so important to be as authentic as I can be while also maintaining my privacy. So I can look back and say, oh, you looked really sad that day, but you still did the words, so it becomes a kind of visual and auditory kind of diary of how I was feeling. And no matter how bad I got, I still managed to achieve at least one small thing. Even if I didn't get out of the bed, I still managed to get that done. And that really helps me.
Explain to us, for anyone who doesn't know, this was actually something that I'm not going to say, brought you. Well, it did. It kind of brought you into the kind of world of a lot of people doing the
Yeah.
Scots Word of the Day. And have you been doing it 5 years now?
5 years. And it's wild. It really is, because I wouldn't be a person who, could keep at something for so long. But that has been so important for me. And I think it feels almost like, so I get really anxious when it's at restaurants and I have to order food or something like that. But if I have to order for a friend, somehow the kind of the ability to do it, if I think I'm doing it for someone else, then it makes it so much easier. And I'm like, the switch flips and I'm like, okay, I can absolutely just do that because you need something from me and I can be there for you. And so I think of the word of the day almost like I'm doing it for other people. I'm doing it for the Scots language itself. And so it doesn't really feel like something I have to do for me. And I think there's a lesson in that, because I try and treat myself as I would a friend, and when you don't take your own advice, but I always think, well, what advice would I give to someone that I really love? And then try and reflect that back inwards. And I find that helps me.
That's interesting. When I saw you at the St Andrews Book Festival in London last year, and I've watched you on the radio on BBC Radio Scotland, and I like you on BBC Radio Scotland because you've got so much energy and you never come across as nervous. And you said, when I watched you at the St Andrews Book Festival, you looked as if you were just, I was envious because you looked as if you were just doing it in your stride. And I chaired a couple of events, and before them, I was in the toilet reading and reading and reading and terrified that I was just going to make a complete arse of it. But you looked so relaxed. Do you not get nervous that way?
I'm constantly nervous, so it doesn't add much more nerves for me, ordering a drink to being on stage in front of loads of people. So I have gotten very good at making people not see the nerves, so it's things like I used to do Robert Burns poetry competitions, which is a great way to make friends. But I used to shake really, really, really shake, like, physically while I was on stage. And I developed this way of walking around the stage to try and, because if an object is in motion, you can't really see it shake. So putting that energy into actually moving my legs meant that you couldn't physically see me vibrating. And people would say, oh my goodness, she's so confident. She's owning the stage. And I would be like, I've cracked it. I've cracked it. They cannot see how nervous I am. But also there's a kind of, I like to tell people how nervous I am, because then it kind of loses a bit of its power, because I think a lot of the energy you expend when you're nervous is trying to make people not see that you're nervous. So when I say to people, hey, I'm really anxious right now, please forgive anything that I do or don't do. But I was speaking to a group of young people recently, and one of them asked me, how do I make it sound or make it look and make it appear like I'm not nervous? Because I might shake or I might sweat or I might stutter or I might stumble. And I said to her, would you respect me any less if I was shaking right now? She said no. I said, would you respect me any less if I was kind of stumbling over my words right now or stuttering a wee bit? She said no. And I said, would you respect me any less if you could see me profusely sweating right now? And she said no. And I said, so why should I respect you any less if you visibly show that you're nervous? Because so often, and particularly when it comes to like important things like poetry and talking about mental health or domestic abuse or things like that, you care. You really care. You really care about the subject. You really care about what you're talking about. And your body knows that. It knows the importance of what you're talking about. And so the nerves do come out. And, some days I'm better at masking it than others. Some days I will be I've cried on stage. I've really been unable to kind of stop myself from fidgeting or shaking. And I would like to think that the people that care about the message and care about what I'm saying, they wouldn't really care about, seeing how much it impacts me, because I try and foster a community that are kind of accepting and inclusive of however mental health or mental illness might present itself. And that's just, one of the symptoms of how we feel. Sometimes our body just responds in ways that we can't control, and we shouldn't have to expend so much energy trying to control them.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking to my son. I got 3 kids. My middle boy's 12, and we were going somewhere. He does a lot of judo, and he gets phenomenally nervous. He is like properly nervous. And I sat him down and I said, you will always be nervous doing this, because it's like anything. If you're not nervous, you probably don't care. And and if you don't care, you probably shouldn't be doing this, so. And I think that's the mark. I think that's a good thing about nerves, and I don't mind that. I think, I get nervous before I do anything, even before coming on to talk to you. I've no idea how it's going to go. So I kind of play through every eventuality from, worst to best case scenario. Anywho, let's talk about the Scots language, because, I was brought up in Glasgow, and we have, I grew up with quite a strong accent, and we have strong colloquialisms in Glasgow, but explain to us how that's actually different from Scots.
So I would put forth a kind of argument that it's part of Scots. Okay. I think sometimes, particularly West Central dialects of Scots, like your Glaswegian, people look down on them. Even people who speak Scots or would consider themselves Scots speakers might say, "Oh, but it's not like Glaswegian. It's not like the slang." And I take great issue with that, because the way I speak, the Scots I use is West Central as well. My family are from Airdrie, so the words that we use, Lanarkshire words, like that's just as valid as maybe your Ayrshire Scots or stuff like that. And I think that speaks to the strength of the Scots language, because it demonstrates how, when you try and eradicate a language, one of the symptoms of that, which turns out to be a kind of strength for Scots, is you get that kind of dialectal variation, because it's protected in communities, and the farming communities and the fishing communities and the mining communities and all these different pockets of people protect and preserve it within their families. But then you'll see, sometimes someone will move to a different place in Scotland and marry someone else, and then suddenly you've got a Bosie in Dundee and you've got a Gansey down in the borders, and it's like, how did that word get there? And that for me is just, I love it. And that's, with the Scots word of the day, what I try and do is not to just focus on words that maybe I grew up hearing, because I'm hold my hands up and say I was extremely privileged to grow up in a house that, didn't just tolerate Scots, but celebrated it and loved it and encouraged it. But a lot of people didn't. And so, if I were just speaking to my own vocabulary, it wouldn't be doing a service to the entire Scots language. And there's so much variation. I'll do a word and someone will say, that's not how I say it. And fair enough, you'll look on the dictionary of the Scots language and it'll give you all the different variations. This is how it's said in Glasgow. This is how it's said in Edinburgh. This is how it's said in Aberdeen. And you can literally track how the vowels and the consonants will shift, and you can see the different spellings, because there's no standardized orthography. You see the different pronunciation. Honestly, I'm like, don't even get me started about Scots, because I'm not going to stop.
I love the fact that you've embraced it. I think when I was growing up, and then I moved down to London when I was about 26, and was almost forced to, through my own, almost like I've got to say it, by my embarrassment of my own accent, forced to flatten it. And, so instead of when I grew up, I would say, I'm going to see a film about the world. It'll be a film about the world. So I was forced, so that when I moved to London, I think people thought I was German for a long time. People would just start to understand me. And now as I got older, even though I'm still down in London, I'm still I'm trying to at least virtually embrace my Scottishness again.
That's it. And the thing is, those little linguistic features, that what you're describing there is a epenthesis or a svaravacti vowel. It's that little aram girl. Oh, there's just something about that just makes me feel like I'm home.
Yes.
It's just these little features, like the rhotic R as well. And the thing is, the more you study about linguistics, the more you realize that these features pop up across the world. There's people who maybe they come from India and they say film as well, and then you can you can connect over that instead of it being a point of disagreement or of anything that tears us apart. It's something that brings us together, and it's beautiful. You can see even, with glottal stops, a lot of people think, oh, that's lazy. That's, it's bad. You should pronounce your T's. But if you look at the language that's spoken in Hawaii, like it has glottal stops as part of the standard
That's
language.
really
And so
interesting.
it's just honestly, there's the minute that you start to investigate into do a language, one thing it does is it tears down hierarchies and it makes you examine things like class, like race, like gender, like ability. All those sorts of hierarchies start tumbling down. But also you realize how incredible it is that humans my mouth vibrates the sound that goes into your ears, and we've just agreed and we've got a consensus as to what the words mean. Like it's just honestly, it blows my mind.
1 in 4 of us will experience a form of mental illness in our lifetime. ScotsCare offers mental health support with quick access to qualified therapists for both children and adults, more quickly than the NHS. For drug and alcohol addiction, we offer a specialist psychotherapy service. If you're a low-income Scot in London and could use the help, get in touch with us.
I want to talk about your poetry. And I was thinking, I even asked my wife this. I was saying, how do I talk to Len about her poetry? Because it was a difficult birth. Is that a fair way to say it? Your poetry was a way of coping with something else that went on in your life. And my wife, Becky, said to me, well, we started to talk about domestic abuse, and I've got a daughter as well. And I started to just look up general stats, Len. And I went on to my wife says, well, go on to the charity Refuge. And I looked on, and I was a bit ashamed of my naivety. And because I came up, this one shocked me. 41% of 14 to 17-year-old girls in an intimate relationship suffer from some form of sexual abuse. 41%. And my naivety does shame me there. That's a terrible stat.
It feels almost like a kind of Sisyphean task. Do you know what I mean? Because the stuff that I write about, I'm trying to enact change. And sometimes you sit and you look at statistics and you think, I am clawing away at a rock face that I'll never be able to change. I can't fix domestic abuse. I can't fix intimate partner violence. I can't fix sexual abuse. And you're right in the sense that my poetry was I love that, it's a difficult birth. Like I often compare it to, a long, long labor of love, because I love poetry and I love writing it and I love reading it. I love performing it. But it is very difficult for me to write and to perform and to talk about the stuff that I do, knowing that the people who get it because they've been through it, and the people who don't might never get it, no matter how much I shout and I scream and I perform in front of them. So it's the kind of thing where a lot of artists, I think they want people to relate to their work, but sometimes I'm like, oh God, I'll look at a young woman, sometimes it's wee lassies even, sometimes you can see, and you can see them greeting and you can see them nodding and you can see them getting it. And I think to myself, oh no, not you.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't mean this to sound like a trite question, but does that make every performance difficult?
Yeah, it does. The thing is, people talk a lot about catharsis. There's a lot of catharsis in my performance because I get to shout and I get to swear. I get to be all angry. I get to feel the things that women aren't supposed to feel publicly. And I get to take myself back. It's like watching a horror movie. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of scared in a safe way. I feel like I'm taking myself back to when the trauma happened, but in a way that I can escape from. But it makes it difficult because there's the act itself and then there's people's perception of the act. So I've been called an exhibitionist. I've been called, airing my dirty laundry. Because the things I speak about, mental illness, domestic abuse, they thrive in secrecy and in silence. And there's a societal stigma around them. Still, even now, do you know what I mean? Even 2025, people still look at you differently when you tell them you've been abused. And I'm pretty open about it, you know what I mean? Because, well, it's like water off a duck's back. But I'll say to people, they'll say, what's your book about? Oh, it's about domestic abuse. And you can see them like pulling back, and I'm like, no, lean in. Like, don't let that end a conversation. Let it start one.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, I don't expect every survivor or any survivor to write poetry, to perform, to tell their story. In fact, when I do, workshops with survivors for doing poetry and things like that, I say, think about the worst thing that happened to you. Now, put that to the side. What do you actually want to write about? because we are more than the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And sometimes people expect me to kind of bleed all over them in order for them to get the catharsis of what I've been through and to listen to me. It should be enough for me to just say, I've been hurt. I shouldn't have to take you through it. But performances are difficult because even now, even as vulnerable as I have been and as open as I've been, there's still a little part of me that just, I wish it hadn't happened. I wish I didn't have to write this. Do you know what I mean? I wish it didn't exist.
I spoke to Denise Mina at the St Andrews Book Festival this year, and she was talking about, and you've kind of already addressed this slightly, talking about catharsis, but she said writing makes her, or helps her, make sense of life. I think that's probably quite true for a lot of writers. Is that true for you?
It definitely, it feels like I'm taking something nuanced and difficult and huge and distilling it. It feels like, I've never made whiskey, but it feels almost like, the process of distillation or taking something and squeezing it. And for me, particularly with the kind of stuff I write, with the rhyming couplets and the tight structure, that is a fixable problem. That's what I love. I love a fixable problem. I'm never going to fix, the topics that I write about. But having that goal of, okay, I need a rhyme for that, I need a rhyme for that. Each line has its balance, has its equal, has its own structure. For me, that is where the catharsis lies. That's where the catharsis lies. That's how it helps me make sense of the world, because I'm taking something that I don't understand and putting it in a format that I do. And poetry can be quite difficult. A lot of people might not like my stuff because it is so simple. It's simple, but it's kind of complex if you understand, because of the simplicity. There's nowhere for me to hide, but also I don't ever want to obfuscate. I don't ever want to talk around a problem, because if I only have someone's attention for the minute and a half the videos online, or the 2 seconds when they're flipping through a book and they find something, I want them to understand what the problem is, so something like domestic abuse or mental illness, how I feel about it, and a call to action or something like that, if that's included in the piece. I don't want to go all around the houses trying to find out, what the point is of the poem. I want them to know first time they read it what the issue is, and that's the kind of poetry I like. I mean, I like to take poetry back to when I enjoyed, poetry, and I think it's when a lot of people stopped liking it. It's this idea of the nursery rhyme, the lullaby, the bedside story, the fairy tale. That for me is such an enjoyable part of poetry that I think a lot of people, they're ashamed that they don't like poetry. And I say, well, did your mum ever read you a bedtime story that rhymed? Oh, aye. Well, then you like poetry.
Do you remember the first poem that you wrote?
Yes. The first one I wrote, absolutely, where I was intentionally trying to write a poem and I wasn't, helping my wee brother with his homework or something, was I had a therapist, and she said that I needed a hobby. And I started cross-stitching because I thought that would be good. And it really messed up my hands. Because the thing about me is, if you say that'll help you, I'm like, right, it'll help me then. Go on we go, so I'll keep going till I'm fixed. So I had to stop because it was really hurting my hand. And I wrote Honey, which is the first poem in the first book. And I remember finishing it and showing it to my mum, and she went, oh, Hen, it's lovely, but it's awfully sad, isn't it?
It's awfully sad.
No, right, so I'm a wee bit happier. So I thought, because she just couldn't, I hadn't really told her I hadn't told anyone about the abuse. So
yeah.
I think reading about it from that kind of visceral, Honey's a very, very visceral piece. And so reading that, I think, kind of shocked her and made her feel really upset. And
you never asked to become, but you have become a kind of ambassador for survivors. But you haven't shirked from that. You've kind of embraced that, which is nice.
I think people have skills. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's got their skills. And I think if I'm willing to be a wee gobshite and talk about everything, do you know what I mean? I can do that. That doesn't hurt me.
Have you used that as word of the day yet? Gobshite.
Oh, I certainly been called it enough. So I'm happy to do that. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that lends itself well to my skills, the stuff that I can do. But I think I would never want to speak for survivors. I'll speak with them, and I'll speak to them, and I'll speak as one. But I want to make sure that people feel that their own voice matters. Do you know what I mean? So when I do workshops with kids and they say, oh, do you know, I'd love to write like you. I said, well, don't write. What are you writing like me for? Write like you. I'm doing my own thing, and you do your own thing, and I'll celebrate you for it.
Big feelings can be hard to handle. ScotsCare offers counselling for children. Safe, supportive and designed for young minds. We offer 6 introductory Zoom therapy sessions with parents to get started. If you have a child in need, contact us.
Do you know this kind of lateral question? Do you know Alistair Heather, the guy on Instagram who does a lot of the Scottish history and does a lot of Scots? He's a kind of Scots language champion.
Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me, you remind me of him in a different way, in that I find this thing I struggle with my kids' education, that is still very top down. And my middle son, Rafe, watches a lot of Alistair Heather on Instagram because it's Scots history, but in a really accessible way. And I kind of feel like it goes back to what you were saying about poetry being a bit unfashionable and people not, and poetry is becoming more fashionable, I think, because people like yourself are allowing it to be consumed in a kind of fun and modern way. Do you think that's fair?
I think accessibility is so important, particularly when it comes to poetry. I mean, I like to say a wee bit tongue in cheek, I write poetry for people who don't like poetry, because for so long I didn't like it. I thought that's not for me. Do you know what I mean? Because the way we were, taught it, and it's no disrespect to the teachers because they've got a hell of a lot to do, a lot to get through in the curriculum. But we'd be given like a concept sheet of all the different kinds of poetic techniques and asked to kind of pick at the bones of someone else's creativity. And the stuff people we were studying, it just wasn't resonating with me. No disrespect to them. Some of them I've met since. I very much enjoyed it. But it just wasn't the stuff I wanted to talk about and that I was experiencing. And maybe that's, the selfishness of a teenager. And I've certainly come to appreciate different styles of poetry since, going to uni. But it's something that I think poetry needs to reach people. Do you know what I mean? People have moments in their life where they reach for poetry. Maybe a funeral, maybe a wedding, maybe a christening, maybe the birthday of a baby, the death of, like that sort of thing. We reach for poetry in moments where we need to put words to these huge feelings. And I think sometimes people think that they don't deserve poetry or that poetry doesn't belong to them.
And I wrote not smart enough for poetry as well.
That's it. Poetry's one of the only art forms where if you don't understand it, it's your fault. Like,
yes. Yeah.
Like it's kind of a judgmental, like, oh well, aren't we? Well, maybe if you study harder. Like, no, you should make it make sense the first time, Hen. Like, it's like, so it's the simplicity. But I would never claim to be, an expert or an authority on poetry or the Scots language even. I'm just an enthusiastic nerd. But for me, accessibility doesn't mean removing intellect. It means giving people the tools to understand what you're doing. And I try to, add accessibility into everything I'm doing, like subtitling my videos, giving the parts of speech, even in the videos, like it's a noun or a naming word. I do that so that if you don't know them, now you do. Do you know what I mean? It takes 2 seconds. And you're right in saying that, accessibility, poetry needs that sometimes, because I think it likes that little exclusivity, that little, oh, aren't we lovely? But it's like, well, no, if the Waynes aren't getting into it, it's not going to be gotten into,
Yeah, and we have to actually appreciate that the way that the next generation consume whatever it is, whether it's maths, English, history, they will consume it probably through the tablet or on the phone or like one of your videos that are subtitled. That's this kind of almost dry book reading where it's forced into you in school is not working for a whole generation of kids.
But I think that's a strength. Do you know what? People will call me like a TikTok poet, an Insta poet. I've certainly met other poets who've got, social media as the kind of platform they use the most. And I think that's such a strength. It democratizes poetry. No longer do you have to be, the financial barrier of buying a book, the physical barrier of having a teacher. Like, you can access art for free at home, in your bed, in the classroom, when you're walking in the street, on the bus, anywhere you are, you can access art, and it's all these micro niches. Some people are absolutely buzzing for haikus, right? That's what they love. They love a haiku. Maybe that's not for me.
Yeah.
I swipe another couple of ways. Some people love acrostic poems. I can't stand them. It's like all these different forms. You can find what works for you, what resonates with you, and then off you go. There you go. You can make it yourself.
And do you know what? And and it's okay to consume this way. Have you watched the film? I think it's on Netflix, Train Dreams.
I've not seen it.
It's really good, and I can't. It's based on a novella, and I can't remember who it is. And it really touched me. I watched it, and it's very slow and it's quite ponderous, and there's no there's no big shootouts in it or anything. It's about this man's life, and it kind of goes from his birth to his death. And it's called Train Dreams. And then so I thought, oh, it's based on a novella. So I went online to find out, and people were slagging it off. And the thing that annoyed me they said it's the Instagramification of a good novel. And I thought, oh, you're using Instagram as an insult now. That really wound me up slightly.
It's so interesting because there will have been people who said, oh, you're doing poetry on the radio. No, it should be the written word. And then people are like, oh, you're writing down poetry. No, it should be sung in the street. Oh, no. Oh, you're using a paintbrush, or you should be using your finger. Like, if you go back in time, you can literally see complaints about the youth reading newspapers on the subway. Like, we love to complain.
We do, don't we? We do.
We love a wee gripe. And the thing is, like, you either move with the times or you stay with the times. And, I love that young people are using social media to connect and to access things that they maybe wouldn't have had opportunity to, because for so long poetry's been the preserve of the university lecture hall and the classroom and things. Maybe some people don't find that space accessible. There should be poetry for them and all.
Yes. And what it says is what it means, as you said earlier. There's no hidden meaning in it. Listen, Len, would you read something for us? Of your choosing? Because I kind of realised that we've not heard any of your poetry on this podcast yet.
Of course. So I will. I'm trying to find something that's not too dour, because I've got a habit of. So would you like something?
Dour? That's a great. I say that to my kids. What's the matter with your face? How come you look so dour? They go, pardon? What?
Would you like something happy or something sad?
Do you know what? I kind of like a bit of melancholy. So shall we go sad?
Shall we go sad? Right, let's go sad. Shall I do the first one I wrote?
Yeah, that seems appropriate. Yeah.
Okay. It's difficult because I usually do this one dead angry, so we'll see how it comes out.
There is a fierceness in your performance that I love.
So this is called Honey, and I wrote this because people assume that abusive relationships are always bad, all the time, consistently bad, but there's ups and downs, and it's in those ups and downs that you find that cycle of abuse. That's why people stay, because they're the person holding you under the water, but also the person saving you from drowning. And one of the words that I would get called when there was a sort of period of reconciliation was honey. And it's such a simple, term of endearment, but it stuck with me in these moments where I felt so unsafe. And so now, having moved on to new relationships, even, my current partner, he called me honey right at the start, and it really upset me, and I couldn't put my finger on why. So I decided to trap it in a poem under a jar of honey. Open the jar, honey. Just let me try to describe how my brain tells my body to die for you, darling, baby, sweet angel, my love. A cast iron fist in a velvet soft glove. I know that you're gone, but it hurts all the same. The bruises have healed, but I can't ease the pain of knowing I let you, permitted, relented, and the thoughts of your hands leave my body demented. I'm haunted by spirits poured slowly on rocks. The incessant tick of biological clocks, but the taste on my tongue of your honey sweet lies, and the beat of my heart drowned in orchestral cries, makes me laugh, honey. My name became honey, something too fucking sweet, and all that I am became something to eat, to consume and use up, to be gorged and left bare, and I begged you to stop, but you just didn't care. You sucked on my bones and you picked the meat clean, and your fingers were gentle and hurt like a dream, but it felt in a way that I can't quite describe, like I was a banquet for you to imbibe, and I'm starving, honey. You called me honey, though I said that it pained me, and day after day you bit down and you drained me of blood, of nectar, of hope and desire. You opened the stove and threw me on the fire, and I burned myself, honey, so brightly for you, And I prayed that you'd fall in and burn with me too, but you liked to watch me with intimate care as my flesh reached a succulent medium rare, and I can't help but find it a little divine that my tears taste like beer and my ashes like wine, and though you loved a drink, you'd refuse just a taste. You'd rather I rot into saccharine waste than I did, honey. Now I have a name, and it sure isn't honey. And of things I could focus on, this one, it's funny because it makes a cute metaphor. Sticky and sweet, and we can laugh about boyfriends and what they can eat. But as with all things, there's a little bit more. There's you standing proudly and me on the floor, and I can't wash you off. God knows that I've tried, but when soap's been rinsed off and I'm all nice and dried, it's still there. Like honey's been poured on my skin, and I know in my heart that I can't let you win. But you have, honey. Thank you.
That's stunning. That's stunning. I love that. The bit where you talk about haunted and that you can't wash it off, that's many of us have these things in our life that no matter how many years go by or how much time goes by, we are still haunted by these things that cling to us.
And that's okay. Like, I think there's such a rush sometimes to get over things, to get rid of things, to get back to work, to stop, like, even grieving. Like, we'll take, 2 or 3 days off and then you're back to work, and it's like, you need to scream for a while.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with somebody about grief. My brother died very young, and somebody said to me, how long do you think it'll take you to get over it? And I said, I'll never fucking get over it. I'll learn to deal with it.
That's it. It doesn't get any heavier. You just get a wee bit stronger.
Yeah. Let's talk about success. If I've got you for a couple more minutes, if you don't mind.
Of course.
How would you define success over the next period for Len Pennie? What's your ambition? You've got 2 books out, poems and not film, world poems.
Yeah.
And the second book, which are both brilliant. How did the publishing deals come about for them?
So a very lovely man named Ludo messaged me and said, "Have you got an agent?" Because I was just posting the poem, and I was like, I am far too clever to ever, fall into the trap of needing help or asking for help. And so I was like, no, I don't. I actually pied him, I think, for like 6 months, which is so embarrassing. And then I got back to him and went, hey, like, I try to let him down gently, being like, I've not thought of a book. I think my stuff lives in the screen. And he was like, no, like, if you ever reconsider, just let me know. And then I got back to him and we got together, and he said, look, I really think a book would be good for you because it would allow you to have this like physical manifestation of all the things you want to talk about and put them all in one centralized place. And I was like, okay, fine. And so we pitched the book, and Canongate, I keep saying they took a chance on me, but I'm trying to get more confident. They recognized the value in the work.
Yes.
And they've been amazing. They've been so nice. They've been so supportive, because I am like, people love the product of mental illness that I give them, where I give them a nice poem about it. But they don't actually understand that they're going to have to deal with a really traumatized mentally ill woman. And so things like emails, like I'm not going to respond to an email until like the deadline 6 months from now. So I've got stuff, I've an invoice for jobs that I've done, you know what I mean? So like I'm terrible, and they work with me and they accommodate me, and I've surrounded myself with a team that just understand. They seek to understand and they seek to accommodate whenever they can. And it's such a privilege to have people around me that actually care enough to try and make the world a little bit easier for me.
Are you working on a new book?
I'm actually not. I'm not. I'm taking a bit of time to myself and to, you asked what success looks like for me. I talk to my parents a lot, like multiple times a day. As long as they are saying, you're doing all right, Hen, like, we're proud of you, that looks like success to me.
But you have a lot of strength, Len, because I think a lot of people have been looking to knock out the next book in order to kind of justify their existence, if you know what I mean. I think it takes a lot of strength to say, I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to wait till it's right or till the material's there. I think it's to do what you're doing is almost more difficult.
Well, I mean, I've always been about sustainable growth. Do you know what I mean? Like, when I started, things were going viral and people were offering, well, you could work with it. Oh, do you want to promote our product? I says, like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do things that will catapult me into the spotlight or into kind of, fame or all that overnight, because I wouldn't be able to handle that mentally. I think I understand part of strength is understand your own limitations. And I think I'm very aware of what would overwhelm me and what would make me feel overexposed and vulnerable.
But do you know what it is? There's an interesting balance here, isn't there? Because you still put yourself, and I mean this in a very positive way, because I tend to do it myself. You still put yourself in the firing line. You put yourself up for things that challenge you and make, going right back to the beginning, make you kind of nervous. But you do these things to, I don't know, feel alive, to challenge yourselves.
That's it, and also to kind of give voice, to add my voice to the people who maybe can't speak out, because I am one drop in a whole sea of ocean, a whole ocean of people who need help. Whether that's, psychological help, the support that I've got there has been kind of invaluable. Whether it's, for domestic abuse, because, there's the myth of strength is something that really annoys me. People say, oh, you left out, like, oh, you're so strong. No, I'm not. I'm supported. People who stay in abusive relationships are not weak. They are not yet adequately supported enough to leave. It takes someone on average 7 times to leave abuse. Okay. And that doesn't make you weak. So I didn't leave or stay gone because I'm strong. I stayed gone and left because I was supported. And so I want to add as much as I can and use my work as a kind of fulcrum or a battering ram to try and effect change and stop the next generations of Len Pennie from being a thing. I want our children to write about leaves and oceans and the universe and space and aliens. I do not want them to have to fight these battles. I'll do that so they don't have to.
Well, Len, you are an absolute inspiration. You're a marvellous writer. And I hope you stay in touch. But thank you for being on the ScotsCare podcast today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
ScotsCare supports Scots in need across London. Your donation, big or small, helps us do more with our services. Head to scotscare.com and click donate.
If you are a woman that has been affected by domestic abuse and would like some support, please call the National Domestic Abuse Helpline on 0808 2000 247 for residents in England. If you're in Scotland, please call 0800 027 1234. If you're a man affected by domestic abuse, please call the Respect Men's Advice line on 0800 801 0327. Links and phone numbers to helpful charities for domestic abuse can also be found in the show notes below.